Salvation. How do we get it? Can we lose it? What exactly is salvation? As a woman of faith, for many years I was in the church and had a spiritual awakening and then had to deconstruct from many of my religious beliefs. I've come to an understanding as I've worked with my spirit team about what salvation really is and why it's not something we actually lose or need to gain as a human. Stay tuned and I'll share more about that. Welcome to the Soul Alignment Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Angie, and I'm inviting you to explore the depths of self-sabotage, limiting mindsets, and the beliefs that hinder our progress in life. Through intuitive messages I receive from my spirit team, I share profound insights to help you live authentically and break free from these limitations. Join me now as we uncover all the keys to living your best life. Welcome back. My name is Angie, and I'm your Soul Alignment Mentor, bringing you intuitive messages from my spirit team to help you align with your most authentic and highest self. So I love being able to engage with people that might be on the same path or are seeking questions or answers to questions that they might have based on the understanding of what they have known about spirituality and connection with God and spirit from a perspective of what we have been taught to believe in this lifetime. As someone who grew up in having connection with spirit in some aspect as a child, I could see, sense, hear spirits. Also, I would hear spirits saying my voice sometimes as I got older. And then I would have experiences even in my 20s, 30s, where I'd actually see energy and spirits around me. In the recent years, my understanding of my expansion of connection with the spiritual realm has expanded and opened up tremendously. And I know that part of that is because I've been able to work through a lot of the programmed ideas and trauma that I have been taught to believe about myself and the world around me. And I am going to come about this in a way that hopefully is very kind and loving regarding the teachings that we might receive in the church setting or through religion. And I want you to keep in mind that this isn't necessarily just something that we are taught in a certain kind of church. This could be in any type of religion where there is a need to have an effort or to change something about ourselves or to accept something or to be something in order to gain ability to have a connection and relationship with God or Jesus. So I will speak directly from my own perspective and experience because I cannot speak for anyone else. I can only speak from my own life experience. But I do hope that this gives you a little bit of comprehension and understanding of what it means when we talk about salvation and why salvation really isn't something that we obtain or need to worry about, because there's no actual salvation that we earn or that we have to get to go back into our true and highest self, which is spirit, which is connected to God. The first thing I want to share is that I did not grow up in a Christian home. My mom and dad divorced when I was very young. And I do remember a couple times around Easter when I was very young, my dad taking me to a Baptist church. The only memory I have of this experience is being in a Sunday school with a whole bunch of kids. And my grandmother had given me a picture Bible. And the Bible, from my perspective as a small child, was huge. I felt like it weighed 10 pounds in my little hand. And so before class, they would have us hold the Bible up above our head and say the saying. I don't even know what it was, but I remember just trying to hold the Bible up and it being so heavy. So that's my first memory of the church, of having experiences like that. Then as I got older and I was in junior high around age 16, I was probably actually a freshman in high school. Friends started to invite me to church with them. And I'd always had these strange experiences, these strange thoughts, feelings, energies, seeing things, sensing things, and wondering about what God was, who God was, what was this man named Jesus, all these things. And so when they invited me, at first I was kind of like not wanting to attend, but I did give in. And I think part of the reason I gave in is one, because I'd had those spiritual experiences and I wanted answers. But two, I was living in a home full of trauma and I wanted a way to get out of that home. And so I thought going into the church would be a safe place for me to be. And it ended up being that way. I would say in many ways, the church helped me to discover myself in a new way so that I could empower myself to heal even up until later in life. I think a lot of the things that I experienced within the church setting gave me the wisdom and knowledge that I have now so that I can explain and teach things much more clearly. And from my perspective, I know I like to have things broken down very easily for me to understand, because when some people are talking to me, I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying. So could you talk in a different language? Like, could you bring it down to my level? And so my desire and hope is to bring the messages that Spirit gives me and the experiences that Spirit gives me in a way that relates to you all. So when I started going to church at age 16, the first thing I learned was half the things I was doing in my life were sin. And I needed to clean up my life. I needed to stop listening to certain kinds of music. I needed to stop engaging in certain activities. I needed to stop speaking the way I had been speaking. I needed to not think the way I had been thinking. So many things that were bad and sinful. And so I began working very hard to change all those things, to become a good person, to become righteous and honorable and a follower of Jesus. I remember accepting Jesus and then going to church camp every summer or to church service every weekend and going up to the altar and confessing my sins, and praying and asking God for forgiveness and reaccepting the Lord and Jesus back into my life over and over and over, because I constantly felt like I was not good enough. I constantly felt like I was a sinner. Gosh, it makes me want to cry almost. It constantly felt like there was always an obstacle to overcome in order to gain my salvation. And so it was exhausting in many ways to continue to try to get to the point where I was good enough for God. Now, I want you to keep in mind that I was coming from a home full of trauma. And when you are in that kind of trauma, that trauma causes you to feel shame. It causes you to feel as if there's something wrong with you, when really there's things happening to you that are pulling out these negative emotions and feelings in you. And then you find your identity in it because you don't know any difference at that time. And so as I'm attempting to fit into this church setting, as I'm attempting to be this good Christian, girl, and then later a woman, I had a lot of shame and fear and guilt that I wasn't doing it right and that I wasn't good enough. And so I constantly was striving. I constantly was praying. I remember when I first started really trying to build a relationship with God and Jesus, I didn't know how to pray. And so I would spend every single night before I went to bed writing a letter to God and talking to him about my life and asking questions and trying to receive answers back. At the time, I did not have a clue that I was a psychic or a medium. And so when I would receive a message back, I didn't know that that was me actually communicating with higher dimensions and spirits. And so I was receiving messages from what we would call God, Jesus, or spirits in general. And so as I went through high school and was attempting to fit into this new world of mine, my family did not go to church. I was the only one that went. They didn't actually approve of me going, and I would sneak out on Sunday morning and go to church. It didn't matter what I was doing that night before. It didn't matter if I had stayed up all night. I still would go to church that next Sunday because I wanted so badly to be in the presence of God. I wanted so badly to be this good human and Christian woman. After high school, I I knew I wanted to be a healer. I wanted to help humans. I wanted to help people to feel better in their life. And the way I knew that in my heart could do that would be teaching people about God, teaching people about God's love and Jesus. And so I went to a Christian college, and I went with the thoughts, I'm going to go and work in a church someday, and I'm going to help people heal, and I'm going to help people to accept the Lord and live a life for God. And halfway through, within my third year of college, I was getting a degree in Bible. I started feeling this pull to move out of that kind of healing work more into the mental health field. Now, in this time, I visited India. I visited some Southeast Asia countries. I won't mention what they were, but just for privacy reasons, because some of them are closed countries. But I was in Southeast Asia several times doing missions work and spreading the gospel and teaching the word of God. And so my relationship with Jesus was fully authentic, fully real, and I was attempting with all my heart to be the woman I was supposed to be as a Christian woman and as somebody that could help others get saved. As I continued my journey through this setting, I ended up in a very charismatic Pentecostal church for over 12 years. If you know anything about this setting, it's very exciting. Lots of dancing, lots of music, the waving of flags, prophecies, speaking in tongues, being slain in the spirit, having people do laying on hands to cast out demons, all kinds of stuff was happening in this setting. And the more and more I got involved in it, I was very, very much involved. As I was learning more and more and more, parts of the puzzle started to seem like they didn't fit together. I started to think about when the pastor would be talking about something or preaching, how one thing he said and the next thing didn't add up. And so I started studying the Bible even deeper for myself. I had probably 5 Bibles, all different versions, that I would line up beside each other and read every single one of them and compare the verses. And then I started noticing this Bible doesn't have this verse and this one does. And why did they take it out of this version and not this version? Then I started studying Revelation deeply, and I was teaching Sunday school at the time. So I was teaching my Sunday school class about these things I was learning. And I was going very, very, very deep into the Word of God. And the more deep I went into the Word of God, the more it didn't make sense. The more I started seeing how things didn't add up. And I started to feel this part of my heart saying, this is not God. This is not who I know God should be or is. God is love. God is peace. God is kindness. God is all things. God is the creator. And it doesn't make any sense to me that God would be putting things such as hate, crime, and leading in anger or jealousy or judgment. That doesn't make any sense that a loving being would be that way. And so I started to really start going inward and asking these deep questions. And I remember I would even ask my pastor questions after service, like, okay, so you said this, but this verse also says this, and this one contradicts with this verse. Why are these verses saying completely different things, but you're saying they're saying the same thing? And he had a really hard time with me in answering these questions and would in some way just kind of dismiss me. I also remember I would have very vivid dreams. I would have these experiences where these spirits were visiting me, and then I would tell people about them at the church. Like, I had this vision, I had this dream, I had this experience in my sleep last night, whatever it was that was happening. And none of them were able to explain it to me. And when I came into my awakening, which was a very sudden experience, I think that in many ways I had started to awaken around 2004. I was about 24 at the time, where I was starting to have really interesting, strange experiences happening to me. Visions were becoming even more frequent. I was sensing and seeing things more often. I was just having all these weird things coming up for me, and nobody was able to explain that to me. But I kept seeking. I didn't ever stop seeking because I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to be the light in the world to help other people. And in 2016, I think I've shared this in several of my videos, and you're welcome to go back and look through it. But just to recap real quick, in 2016, in my backyard, I heard an audible voice. And at the time, I was still in church. I was very caught up in it. I know exactly what I was thinking that day. I was thinking about my sin. I was thinking about my salvation. I was thinking about being a good Christian. And it was running through my head like constantly. And how can I be this amazing woman for God? And that's when the voice came through. And I heard the voice say, there is no condemnation. Stop walking in condemnation. And I remember for the first time, I stopped and I thought, what does that even mean? To not walk in condemnation, to not feel like I am not good enough. And that is when I heard the voice start speaking to me in a different way. And I started realizing this voice is not the devil. This voice is not here to harm me. This voice is trying to help me. It was the most loving, kind energy and voice I'd ever heard. And I knew there was something in it. My entire energy shifted in that one moment in my backyard as I'm mowing my yard. And at that point, I didn't just suddenly stop believing in God or believing in salvation or Jesus. I didn't just stop all of those things. I had to work through it with trembling and fear because I truly did believe that we could lose our salvation and go to hell. I truly did believe in demons. I truly did believe in all the things I'd been taught to believe about myself and God and humanity. I believed that the world would come to an end and that people would be left behind. I believed these things deeply. And as I kept seeking and learning and growing, the more I started to see more clearly that these things were not actually true. And that the God of the universe, the energy, the source of who we truly are, is beyond comprehension of our human knowledge. And there's no way as a human anybody can truly explain how great and marvelous this energy is. There was an experience that I had within the first couple years of my awakening that I started to really feel like the more I tried to be who the church wanted me to be or Jesus wanted me to be, the less I was myself. And so I started trying to add things into my life that I loved and I enjoyed that I'd given up because of trying to be this Christian woman. And one of the first things that I started doing was listening to music that I loved. Because I remember I was so fearful of listening to anything outside of Christian music that I was going to be against God or not being a good Christian. And so I slowly started taking these steps through the process of releasing some of those programmed ideas of what it meant to be a woman of faith. Then when my dad was diagnosed with cancer and I started going through that process with him, things began to really come to my mind of like, it doesn't make sense that anybody would be in hell or be separated from God. Because all humans, to their core, I truly believe this, even the most evil humans that we come across on earth, to the core, all once were little babies, little tiny kids that had no idea what hate was. This makes me want to cry. That had no idea what judgment was or how to be mean to another human. No human comes into this world with the idea that they want to be in pain or cause another person pain. And so it didn't make any sense to me that this loving being that we came from would purposely, because of whatever choice we made as a human here on earth, put us back into pain when we left the earth. It didn't make any sense to me. My loved ones were not Christian. They had not accepted the Lord. And the thought of them being in hell was one of the most horrible thoughts I had as a Christian. I had to dismiss that from my mind when I was a Christian because it was too painful to think about these people I loved being in eternal punishment. I was just telling a friend the other day about how when I was a Christian, I came up with this idea that God eventually would destroy hell and that all these eternal spirits would disappear and not exist anymore. But we're eternal. We are all eternal beings. God is an eternal being. The universe is eternal. We just put time to things because we are humans. And so when we look at things from a perspective of time, we feel like we don't have enough. We feel like there's something we have to do with the time to earn something or gain something or be something. But time is an illusion as a human. When you are back into higher dimensions in the spirit realm, time does not exist. Our loved ones that have transitioned into higher dimensions, who have had their human life and went back to spirit, they do not exist in time. That is our understanding. And we need that understanding as humans because we need to have order. If we didn't have things as time and order and structure here, it would be chaos because it is such a dark, low energy here on earth that we purposely leave our higher self to come and experience because we understand in our highest self and our spirit self that these experiences as a human, the pain that we go through is what causes us to grow and learn. None of us want to change something unless it causes us pain. The way that we grow and heal is by feeling things that cause us to want to feel, to grow and heal. Without feeling uncomfortable, there's no reason to do anything different. And so our spirit understands that. Our spirit understands that there's a difference between reading a book about going for a walk and understanding all the things that you can learn about going for a walk and how it will benefit your body, and then actually doing it and actually going for the walk and actually benefiting from it. That is what our spirit is doing. It's taking the knowledge and wisdom of its true self that is connected to higher dimensions into God and coming and experiencing that wisdom in a different form so that when it goes back to its original form, it expands and grows. And this is how God grows itself. This is how the wisdom of the universe expands. This is how we are a part of the source energy God creating more and more of itself and more of the universe. This is why we're discovering more planets. This is why we're discovering more tools to use as human. This is why we've seen evolution happen within, all kinds of things in human. Just in my lifetime, we didn't have cell phones growing up. We didn't have a remote to the TV. We didn't have these things. And here we are, expanded and growing and learning as humans. And many people may think that's not positive, but it is. It is connecting us more and more, even though it may appear like it's not. We can sit here and I can share this video with you and we can be in the same energy together by simply listening to one another, being in our presence of one another through video, through connecting over the internet. Now, in person is just as important. I don't ever want to dismiss that. We need that. That is part of our evolution as well. And I do believe that will become more and more frequent as we continue to grow and ascend into New Earth, which is a whole nother topic. But for the purpose of expansion and getting clarity out from our higher self's perspective, these tools are actually enhancing humanity in many ways. So for the topic of salvation, there's no way that there's an energy out there that is going to create part of itself and then dismiss itself. We are not here to try to earn our way back to heaven or earn our way back into our truth of where we came from. We're here to experience something that's separate from it so we can go back to it and bring that wisdom back into that part of who we are. I want to share a experience that I had in a meditation. I know I've shared this in another podcast or YouTube video before, but this experience really, really impacted me. And I have a couple of these now. Let me ask my spirit team which one I should share with you. Okay, they just told me. So I started meditating probably 5 or 6 years ago. And at first it was very hard for me. I couldn't get my mind to shut down. It was kind of entertaining to think about all the things I suddenly needed to do when I sat down to meditate, like vacuum when I hadn't vacuumed in 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, however, like how that became a sudden thing I needed to do. So it's interesting how our mind works when we start to really go inward and try to teach our mind to slow down. And the more you do that, though, the more you practice, the easier it gets. So as I was learning to teach myself how to meditate, and I was spending more time in spirit or in my in quieting my mind, I wasn't actually attempting to contact spirits at this time or connect with higher dimensions because I didn't know I could. I was just meditating and healing my body and healing my energy and doing guided meditations and listening to frequency music, all those things. Then I had this experience. I remember I was sitting in a chair meditating, and it was before work one day. And I saw my own spirit come out of my body. And my body began to rise up out of my body and above the earth. And I could see the earth from my spirit's perspective. And as I rose up off the earth, I looked back at the earth and I saw how beautiful it was, how marvelous. Every single thing on the earth had a frequency and a light to it. The trees had an aura. The grass had an aura. The homes had an aura. The humans had the aura. Everything had its energy and aura, and it was beautiful. It was like a very faint rainbow color all over the earth, and it was glowing. And I realized at that moment that the earth was alive. It was its own being, its own entity, and it was breathing and it was growing and it was going through its own trauma and healing. And as I was watching this in awe, if that wasn't enough, my spirit continued to elevate. And I went through a period of what we would call dark energy, but this energy felt like a wound, like a safe place. And I realized that this was the dimension that spirits would pass through when they left their human body to go back into their higher self and their spirit self. And that this wound of the universe that spirits would pass through was the wounds that helped spirits to transition back into their original form, because this experience as a human is so brief. Like I was talking about time doesn't exist to our higher self. Time doesn't exist in our human existence. So our spirit doesn't understand that. From our spirit's perspective, life is a blink. It's literally a second. So if you think about a second, like whiplash almost, our spirit comes for a second and goes right back. And so we're kind of disoriented as we move back into the spirit realm, because that's where we came from. And we have this place of adjustment that we go through. And this is where our spirit guides will come, and our loved ones who have passed before us, or even generations and ancestors or angels or whoever it is that's going to welcome us back into the higher realms. They're there to help us adjust back into our frequency, into our truth. And then we rise into another dimension. And my spirit continued to rise through this up into another dimension. And when I got into a higher dimension, I began to look around, and it was the most beautiful experience. It still makes me want to cry. I saw billions and billions of stars. And of course, in my perspective, I thought they were actual stars. And so I'm looking around at this glorious, magical place that I'm in, and there's just billions of stars around me. And I just suddenly start feeling overwhelming love towards every single one of these. And I'm just like, wow, I cannot believe how much love I have for all of these stars. And then as I zoomed in a little bit more to each star, I started to realize that they weren't stars, that they were souls, they were spirits. And then my comprehension came back of like, oh, I'm loving these spirits. I'm loving these other beings that are just like me. And as I'm in this place and seeing all this beauty and all these stars and all these souls around me, I start to feel this really, really, really amazing love energy to the upper right side of me. And I knew without even looking that it was what we call God. And I turned to look, and it was this magnificent bright light beyond anything I could comprehend or explain as a human. It was the most radiant, beautiful, loving energy I have ever experienced in my human self. I know my soul understands it, but my human self does not right now. So when I get back to my spirit self, I will understand. But in this place, I remembered, this is where I came from. This is what created me. And as I'm engaging with this energy that we call God or source energy or the universe, whatever it is, creator of all, I start to see these little stars, these little souls shoot out of this big ball of energy, and they're shooting out just one by one, just like several at a time sometimes. And I see them shooting out, shooting out, shooting out. And then all of a sudden comes to my mind, this is what it means to be created in the image of God. We are direct frequencies of God. We are source energy. God created us out of itself. We are it. We cannot get away from ourselves. The only way we get away from ourselves is through our own free will, through our own experience, through our own manifestation, our own ideas, our own beliefs. That is the only way we get separated from God or source energy. There is no salvation to earn when you are it, when you are a direct reflection of it, when you are the I am. Just as Jesus spoke when he was asked, are you God? He said, I am. He wasn't saying he was the only one. He was explaining that to humanity, that is what we are. We are the I am. We are the energy of God experiencing itself in the human form. Our soul, our spirit, that star I saw, that is reflecting itself into a soul, which is reflecting into a human body. And we are experiencing our soul from this perspective in this time. And we will be going back to our true original self. And there's no way we can disconnect from that. There's no way that we can get away from our true self. The only way that happens, why we are here on earth, is through the programming and beliefs that we are taught and the ideas that we bring in about what we think God is or what we think salvation might be. Salvation is just simply coming back to self. Salvation is remembering. Salvation is allowing ourselves to experience who we really truly are without the pollution of the world and the mindset and the energy and the darkness and the fear that we humans created on earth. It does not exist in the other dimensions like it does here. And we don't have to worry about that experience when we go back into our higher self, into our spirit. And we have a team of guides, and we have loved ones, and we have angels, and we have so much waiting to bring us back when we get there. And none of that is in fear. And none of that is in trying to be good enough. None of that is requires us to be good enough or to earn or to accept anything. The only thing that we need to accept is that we are eternal beings. And the more you get to know yourself as an eternal being, as a soul living a human life, that is your salvation. You learn who you really are, and you get to experience that as a human, which is one of the most enlightening, amazing experiences. Because then you don't have to fear anything, and you can look around the world around you and understand that darkness is not the way, that love is. And that is where we want to be, in the energy of love. I hope this was helpful for those of you that have wondered about salvation and if you can lose it. Feel free to leave a comment for me. I would love if you would like and follow, share, whatever feels comfortable for you. But thank you for the opportunity to allow me to share this story with you today. I wish you all the best day, night, evening, whatever time it is for you. I send you all the universal love. Namaste.